Minecraft, there are all sorts of different ways to get hurt. You can get stabbed, launched into the void, fall off a cliff, and perhaps most fatally, your dog can be killed. But how much damage can be done in just one hit? That's an interesting question, and one I'll be exploring pretty in-depth in today's video. First things first though, what even is damage? Well, most players seem to think that you can take 10 damage before you die. This is untrue though. As I'm sure most experienced players know, you don't have 10 health, you have 20. In Minecraft, taking 1 damage is the same as taking 1 half heart. So to die, you must take 20 true damage. True damage meaning damage done after armor is taken into account. So with that said, I want to find out the most damage you can do with 1 hit, 1 left click. Yes, there are tons of other ways to harm others. You can shoot a bow, ignite TNT with a flint and steel, and maybe, just maybe, build a massive rail cannon that can one-shot the Ender Dragon. But today, I want to focus just on 1 hit. No more, no less. Just 1 left click of the mouse. But of course, there is one loophole. Our hit will be separated into 2 parts, the strike and the after effect. After a bit of thought, I've decided that anything less than 4 seconds after the hit is fair game. So for instance, knocking someone into lava with your hit is perfectly valid, and the lava will take 4 seconds to deal damage before I no longer count it as part of the original hit. So let's start with the strike, the actual hit part of the hit. How much damage can that initial punch do? Well, as I'm sure most of you know, on a naked player, your slap will only do 1 measly point of damage, or 1 half heart. But we can increase that pretty substantially. If you hit your target as you're falling back towards the ground after a jump, your damage will become 150% of what it normally is. This is called a critical hit. In our case, this just turns our damage to 1.5, or 1.5 half hearts. Still not too good. But what if we added strength? Strength isn't a multiplier like critical hits, it adds damage. For every level of strength you add, you do 3 more damage, so a strength 1 punch can deal 4 damage, or 2 hearts, and a strength 2 punch, 7 damage. That's as much as a diamond sword. Combining critical hits with strength 2, and we can have our bare hand deal 10.5 damage, or 5 1/4 hearts, in 1 hit from the fist. That's as much damage as a regular netherite axe. Speaking of which, what if we used a weapon? As you probably know, there are tons of different tools in the game, but in terms of absolute damage, there is a clear winner. The netherite axe. Dealing 10.5 damage in just 1 go, this thing is a beast. But it can do so much more. With a critical hit, the damage jumps, pun intended, from 10 to 15, a difference in 2.5 hearts. And with strength 2, 24 total damage. That's enough to knock out a player in full leather in just 1 hit. But this is where tools get an advantage over your bare hand. They can be enchanted. For each level of sharpness you add to your axe, it does 0.5 times the level, plus another 0.5 damage. So while a sharpness 1 netherite axe on its own only does 11 damage, a sharpness 5 netherite axe does 13. Combining everything together, and a strength 2 critical hit from a sharpness 5 axe can deal 27 damage, or 13.5 hearts, enough to knock out a player wearing full gold armor. Now, I would like to quickly mention that technically this isn't the absolute maximum. Smite and Bane of Arthropods both amp up your damage more than sharpness, but only work on mobs that are undead and arthropods respectively. So for our purposes, we'll stick to sharpness because it's more general. But yes, if you said we could do more damage if we had one of these two, you wouldn't be wrong. But here's where it gets fun. Now that we've established the most damaging strike, 27 damage, it's time to consider the other part of the hit. All the possible after effects. And it gets crazy. First of all though, let's get the weaker ones out of the way before we get into the juicy stuff. Punching someone into a wither rose is one of the weakest ways to do more damage. After 4 seconds, the rose would only have done 2 extra damage, or 1 heart. A cactus isn't much better, dealing 8 damage in 4 seconds, or 4 hearts, and the same applies to suffocation. And while it doesn't do that much damage, it raises the point that we don't actually have to punch our player. Instead, my one left click breaks a string that sends gravel to suffocate my friend here. If you were to design a machine to break bedrock and make a hole into the void and punch your friend into it, let me tell you, it would not be worth it at all. Because of all the time you actually have to spend falling into the void, while your friends certainly won't be escaping anytime soon and definitely will die, for our purposes, they're only going to be in the damage zone of the void for around 1.5 seconds. And in our case, 4 seconds after our initial strike, they would have only taken 12.5 damage, or 6.25 extra hearts. They say though that the bedrock layer at the bottom of the world is what separates the overworld from the nether. So let's heat things up. Literally. Stepping onto a magma block does the same 8 damage in 4 seconds as before, and so does knocking your friend into fire. But while a normal campfire fire can only do 8 damage in 4 seconds, a soul campfire can do 16, or 8 hearts in 4 seconds, burning our player twice as fast. But even that is doubled by lava, which can do 32 damage in 4 seconds, or 16 hearts, enough to kill your friend all on its own. But surprisingly enough, what burns the most is the pain of such a small percentage of my audience being subscribed. If you enjoy these videos, then please consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps me out a ton. So scroll down and see if you are subscribed. If you are, thank you so much, and if you aren't, I would greatly appreciate it. Piglin brutes in the nether are one of the strongest mobs in the entire game, dealing 7 damage every hit. In 4 seconds, they can hit you 4 times, dealing 28 extra damage. But they actually aren't the deadliest mob. That title goes to the Charged Creeper. The Charged Creeper, when exploded at point blank range, can deal 85 damage. That is a ton, enough to nearly wipe out 5 health bars. In fact, using the max axe from before, hitting someone into one of these bad boys is enough to wipe out anyone wearing even full Blast Protection 4 netherite armor. However, while charged creepers may be a bit hard to come by, end crystals are not. Using a gas tier, 3 obsidian and 5 glass, you can craft an end crystal, a bomb that you can place on your opponent dealing just as much damage as a charged creeper. But sadly, there is a trade-off. In our case, because we only have 1 hit, we can't hit the player with our axe, we can only punch the crystal. Still, that is a ton of damage. Another smaller explosion is regular TNT. TNT, while not being as strong as a charged creeper or an end crystal, is still a formidable weapon, dealing 57 points of damage, easily enough to wipe someone out if they aren't careful. But what if we placed a ton of TNT? Like 2, or 10, or 30? Well, sadly, it won't do any extra damage. TNT takes 4 seconds to explode, just enough time for it to count as part of the hit. So what if we explode, let's say 3 TNT at once? It will still only take 4 seconds, and deal 3 times as much damage. Or will it? Because when we talk about damage, it's crucial that we can consider iframes. Iframes, or invincibility frames, are moments after a hit where the target is sort of immune to extra damage. Let me explain. When you get hit, your player flashes red for exactly half a second. In that time, any attack that would usually do damage is invalidated. However, if you attack with more damage than the original hit, the player will take the difference in the 2 damage values, the new one and the original one. This leads to an interesting phenomenon where if you attack 50 times in 1/2 second, the only hit that will count is the one that will do the most damage. So even if you blow up 50 TNT at once, since they all do the same amount of damage in the same iframe, it will have the same result as just one piece of TNT. Cool mechanic, but also kind of a bummer. But TNT and creepers aren't the only entities that pose a threat to you. If you place 24 or more minecarts on a single block, they begin to cram and obliterate any player that falls in with them, dealing massive amounts of damage. In 4 seconds, walking into one of these death pits results in 48 extra damage, and that's regardless of armor. So even if you were wearing full netherite, falling into a pit of 24 or more minecarts would be enough to destroy 2 full health bars in just 4 seconds. But even this isn't the end for entities, because we have wolves. Wolves in Minecraft aren't usually considered a lethal weapon, but what if you bred 20 wolves, tamed them all, and gave them all strength too? Yeah, then we're talking. Imagine someone goes to pick a fight with you, and you hit them, and suddenly out of nowhere 20 wolves teleport and start mauling your opponent. They wouldn't stand a chance. Even without strength, my army of 20 wolves can deal 40 damage in 4 seconds, completely obliterating a naked player in 2 seconds. And with strength too, that number just increases tremendously, to 106 damage in 4 seconds. That's enough to completely wipe out a full netherite player in only 4 seconds. And that's with only 20 wolves. Imagine how much havoc you could wreak with even more. 20 is just the beginning. But let's leave Mother Nature behind for a bit and focus on some more industrial methods. Using a redstone timer set to 4 seconds, I can set up an automatic dispenser that spams me with harming potions. These things do loads of damage, and while not all of them register due to iframes, it still hurts like a truck. With potions of harming 1, in 4 seconds we take 32 damage, or just over 15 full health bars. And with harming 2, with or without armor, that doubles to 64 damage in 4 seconds. That means that every second you'd be taking 8 hearts of damage. That's insane. Enough to kill you 3 times over in 4 seconds, even with full netherite. But even that isn't the end of it. Instead of harming potions, we can fill the dispenser with fireworks. If you shoot a firework at yourself from the creative inventory, it does no damage. It only begins to hurt when you add firework stars to the crafting recipe. The more stars you add, the more the damage increases. With 1 firework star, the damage is already crippling. 25 hearts in 4 seconds. But with the maximum number of stars per firework, 7, each one does a whopping 15 damage on its own. And as a result, in just 4 seconds, we are subject to a colossal 130 points of damage. That's 65 hearts, twice as much as the charged creeper, enough to completely wipe out 6.5 total health bars in just 4 seconds. Brutal. However, in the end, Mother Nature pulls ahead of our redstone shenanigans, with the ultimate weapon as old as time, fall damage. Fall damage is devastating. You could lose hours of work in an instant if you step into the wrong place. But just how far can you fall in 4 seconds? To answer this, we first have to figure out, how do you fall? How does Minecraft decide how to fall? Minecraft doesn't have a set gravity for all of its entities. Falling blocks can fall slower than players, and players also accelerate as they fall further. Doing a bit of testing and a bit of research, I was able to find that Minecraft's gravitational constant, or the rate at which Minecraft pulls you downwards, is around 27 blocks per second. With that information, all we gotta do is plug it into the formula for falling, which looks something like this, where h is the height traveled, v0 is the initial velocity we're falling at, which in this case is 0 because we just get pushed off, g is the gravitational constant, and t is time. With all these numbers plugged in, we can see that in t equals 4 seconds, the amount of blocks we can fall should be around 216. Fall damage is also luckily very easy to calculate, with each block fallen after the third dealing 1 damage point. So in 4 seconds, we take a massive 213 points of damage. Combine this with the 27 damage from the max axe, and we get the final answer, 240 damage in one hit. Enough to clear 12 total health bars. Jesus, that's a lot of damage. But with all of that said, that wraps up today's video. I hope you have enjoyed and maybe even learned something new about the game. If you did, then please do consider subscribing, it helps out a ton. And as always, peace out, and have a good one.